جماله طبيب الرسالة يا محلى جماله طبيب الرسالة علي 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 حيدر علي انت العلا وعنوانه دين النبي بك ارتفع بنيانه الله اصطفاك بحكمته وبرهانه.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين رحمة للعالمين طه وياسين بالقاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين ورحمة الله على محبيهم ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من يومنا هذا إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. If you remember the day before yesterday on Thursday when we began our discussion on Surah Al-Mubarak al-Yasin, we had mentioned that it was a Makki surah. I don't want to repeat what I had already mentioned, but I will just have to say two things. Number one is that I didn't mention that it is the 36th surah of the Quran Majid in Sipara number 22. So it is the 36th surah, Sipara number 22, Makki surah. And we had mentioned that after the Bismillah, Allah Ta'ala is taking an oath, a qasam. And we had mentioned in that discussion that whenever anybody wants to, if they take a qasam, number one, the thing that they take the qasam on is very important. And the thing that is to follow, or the statement that is to follow, is very, very important. So Allah Ta'ala now, after taking the qasam, is saying that إِنَّكَ لَمِنَ الْمُرْسَلِينَ عَلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ. That surely you, it's addressing Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's saying that surely إِنَّكَ عَلَى الْمُرْسَلِينَ, that surely you are from amongst the messages. إِنَّكَ لَمِنَ الْمُرْسَلِينَ, that you are from the Mursaleen. And if you look at the lives of the prophets who were sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will see that, and again in the Madaris we teach this as a very basic course, that all of them were Nabi, but out of the Anbiya, out of the Nabi, only a select few, 313 were Rasul. So the Quran in Surah Yasin is testifying that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is from those Rasul, from the Mursaleen. Not just a Nabi, but he was at that higher level. And of course, out of all the 124,000 Nabi or Anbiya, 313 were Mursaleen, were Rasul. That means that they had a very specific or a certain message to convey. From those Mursaleen, from those who were Rasul, there was a group of 5 of them who were known as Ulul Azm. That means the highest of the high. The Azm obviously refers to the highness of them. And the Holy Prophet is also known as Sayyidul Anbiya wal Mursaleen. That he is the leader of all of this whole group. So the group of that 5 select, the group of the 313 Mursaleen, and the group of the 124,000, or if you minus the Prophet, 123,999. So the Quran is saying that we are verifying, we are bearing witness that you are one of those Mursaleen, one of those messengers, ala siratim mustaqim. And on a number of occasions, the siratim mustaqim comes up to symbolize, and if you remember Surah Fatiha, you will see Sirat al-Mustaqim. In Surah Yasin, actually it appears twice, a little later on as well as in the beginning here. But Allah Ta'ala, now you see here, Allah Himself, Jalla Jalaluhu, He is verifying and testifying that you are our Rasul. One of the reasons that the Mufassirin, the commentators, have mentioned that there was importance in these, especially in these particular ayat of Surah Yasin, again being in Makkah, was because there was a lot of attacks on the prophets at a different level. One more salat, please. Come on. There was a lot of attacks on the Prophet, and of course, we know that there were physical attacks. People were throwing stones, people were throwing rocks, people were boycotting the Prophet, they were beating him, they were doing so, and to the other Muslims as well. If you remember the history as to what used to happen to Bilal, these were tortures that were unimaginable just for saying La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. So the tortures were okay, but in addition to those physical tortures, there was also a different kind of torture, and perhaps I will say that this second torture was not any less in hurt than the first kind. And that torture was a verbal or an emotional torture. So they would say to the people that, oh, Muhammad has gone crazy. He is an insane person. He is mad. They would tell the people he's a magician. He's a sorcerer. He's practicing witchcraft. These verses of the Quran, because they were so beautiful and people would be attracted, they would say, this is sorcery, this is poetry. And sometimes the people would wonder that why these three particular insults, the poetry, the sorcery, and the insanity. And each of them, there was a certain group of people that would move away from the Prophet in each of these categories. So the intellectuals, those who were the smart people, because they had, there was a certain childishness in the Arabian Peninsula about poetry. So the intellectual people would not go close to a poet because they used to write poetry. They would write shairi about anything. They liked the color of their horse, they would write a poetry about that. They would like the color of their alcohol, the glass that their alcohol was in, they would write a poetry about that. They used to write poetry about the most nonsensical things. So the intellectuals used to stay away from poets. Unlike today, where poets and poetry has taken on a very important form, and poetry is actually a way of bringing about awareness. If you look at contemporary poets like, Allama Iqbal, you see poets like Saadi and Rumi, you look at contemporary poets who have been writing and conveying a message, you see that many of them have shaken communities, have shaken the thoughts of individuals. But in those days, poetry was completely the opposite. So the intellectuals would stay away from poets. So the effort was to keep those who were intellectuals away from Rasulullah. Sorcery and magic, because women were always afraid of magics and magicians, and they didn't want their children to be influenced by by this magic. Women would stay away from the Prophet if they felt that he was a sorcerer. And so there was different groups that were basically told, and by calling him an insane person, a madman, children would stay away from him, because children don't want to be beside an insane person. The parents would tell people, so these groups would stay away from the Holy Prophet of Islam. And the message of these attacks, because like I was saying, that when the Quran was being recited, when the Prophet was giving a khutbah, why I said that these insults were serious, sometimes the kuffar would start making noises, and they would start singing songs, and they would start just basically distracting it. So you can imagine for a moment that if I'm trying to, let's say, talk about Surah Yasin, or I'm trying to give a lecture or anything, and a group of people just start making noise just to distract the people. Sutha se, badai tawajjuh pache jaise, kyan thi awaaz aave che, kaun suke che, what's happening, what's going on? So the people's attention, instead of the message, now gets diverted. And now to try and restart it becomes difficult. So this was the effort of the Qurayshis to try and divert the people away from the message. In light of all of those attacks, the Quran is saying that no, إِنَّكَ لَمِنَ الْمُرْسَلِينَ عَلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ, that you are on the right path. Let them say whatever they want. We are saying this. This is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying that we are on the right path. These attacks had reached such a level that there's a very famous story that was narrated in the time of Rasulullah, that one time the Prophet saw a lady who was carrying her groceries or water, a heavy load. And she was walking, so the Prophet figured that she probably doesn't have anybody to help her out. So he offered her help, and he was carrying this load towards her house. Now this is a lady who has nobody else to help her, so it's not like she's got a social, sometimes we have social butterflies in the community. Yeah, they're always with people, they're always surrounded by people, they've always got somebody, koi na koi baaju mein hoy che. This lady was completely alone. There was not even a family member who was helping her, otherwise they would have lifted this heavy load for her. The Prophet helps her. As they are reaching, or they've reached the house, the lady tells the Prophet, this old Zaifa, this Buria tells the Prophet, she says, young man, I don't have any money to give you. I don't have the ability to give you. I don't have anything that I can recompense you. But because I am aged, I will give you some nasiha, some advice. And the Prophet hasn't disclosed who he is. The lady says, I want to give you some words of advice. I can't pay you. The Prophet said, yes, dear lady. She says, I have heard in Makkah these days, there is a man who is claiming to be bringing a message. He's claiming to have some words from God. He is claiming some things. He has split up families. He is keeping, making friction in the community. He is causing fasad and fitna and all these things. And she goes, my advice to you, young man, you are a good man. You've helped me. You've been so kind. My advice to you is stay away from him. Allahu Akbar. The Prophet puts his head down and says, lady, auntie, madam, I cannot follow this advice. She goes, why? I'm telling this to you for your own good. She goes, no, this person you are talking about, he says, that is me. I am the one that you have just written. At that time, the lady was shocked. This elderly, the old lady was in a state of shock. After some moments, minutes, seconds of reflection, immediately she says, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu annaka Muhammadar Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The point I was trying to make is that the rumors had reached such a point that even a Zaifa who did not have television or satellite or a cell phone, which is our main mode of communication to each other, telling each other what is happening, what's not happening, even she had heard this rumor that there is a man in Makkah who is doing this. So you can imagine why the Quran Majid, especially in Surah Yasin, is coming to the aid of Rasulullah. And then the ayats continue that Allah Ta'ala is saying, Tanzeel al-Aziz al-Rahim. This is a revelation from the merciful, Aziz al-Rahim, the wise, the powerful, and the merciful. Aziz has got a number of very different meanings. In some cases it's referred to as wise, in some cases it's referred to as an authoritative, in some cases it's also referred to as a symbol of power, as somebody who is an Aziz, like a prime minister, or if you remember that Hazrat Yusuf used to be called Azizul Misr, that he was like the most important person in Misr at the time. So Aziz, when it's of course talking about Allah, it is going to the superlative stage. And of course, the merciful, we've talked about Rahim before. لِتُنذِرَ قَوْمَ مَا عُنذِرَ آبَاءُهُمْ فَهُمْ غَافِلُونَ. That you will be warning a people, you are warning a community, a qawm, who say that their Aba, their forefathers were not warned. So you're coming to warn those people because one of the, and again later on in the surah it comes about, that people used to just follow the religion of their forefathers and their ancestors blindly. There was no real reason, they would just do it. And sometimes, even us today, કોઈ તમને પૂછે કે તમે આ કેમ કરો છો, કેમ આવી રીતના છે, કેમ ટાઈમિંગ્સ આવી રીતના છે, કેમ આવી રીતના છે, આપણો જવાબ શું હશે? બસ અમારા અબા અજદાદ એવી રીતે કર્યા હતા, અમારા બાપ દાદા એવી રીતે કર્યા હતા, બસ અમે બી એમ કરતે, અમે બી એમ કરીએ છીએ. So as a result, we sometimes say, and I'm not saying this is wrong necessarily. In some cases, traditions are not good. In some cases, traditions are good. I'm not saying that all traditions should be discarded. What I'm saying is that we must always be reflecting on our actions and what is happening around us to know whether this particular tradition or this thing is good, it's good for the community, or it's not good. Not good for the community. And whether it comes to weddings and marriages, whether it comes to our own timetables, whether it comes to what we're doing, how we're dressing, what we're wearing, these are all things that come into this point. That one of the things that people used to say is, well, our forefathers were doing this, so why should we change? And so فَهُمْ غَافِلُونَ. So they have become ghafil. So they have become, I often sometimes just to explain the word ghafil or ghaflat, it's a kind of a sleep. Although I know you will tell me that in Arabic naum is sleep. Ghaflat is a kind of an intellectual sleep. It's a sleep that basically you're not conscious of what is around you, or you're not paying attention to what is around you. You might be walking and there might be something horrible happening to your right or to your left, and you're only looking at the doorway, you're only going through. This is the kind of ghaflat. And ghaflat, when it comes to the Islamic terminology, often refers to one who is not aware of his creator, who is not aware of her, her own existence and her relationship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So again, the word ghafila, ghaflat, ghafl often arises in the Quran Majid. لَقَدْ حَقَّ الْقَوْلُ عَلَىٰ أَكْثَرِهِمْ فَهُمْ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. That even, the truth has come to them, this haqq has come to them, even then, لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ, that they will not believe. And so there are certain groups in the community, there are certain groups in the society that will not believe no matter what happens to them. And again, in the early days of the advent of Islam, there was countless miracles that were happening around the people. And even then they would not believe. They saw the rocks, they heard the rocks speaking to the Prophet. They saw the trees bowing down, they saw the moon they saw all of this. We just read about it. We are told about it from the mimbar, from the books, from the historians, from all of this. Those people actually saw it. And people often wonder that, if there was some definitive proof, then maybe people would have believed. Even today, if there was some miracle, mu'jiza, some definitive proof that can scientifically be proven for the existence of God, I can comfortably say that even if there was 100% proof of something, there will still be a group that will not believe. There are countless miracles around us. The Quran Majid being the biggest miracle, what it contains, what it has got. Scientists who have looked at the Quran have reflected, and when they have done an objective review, they have acknowledged. Dr. Maurice Bussell wrote some phenomenal writings on the Quran science and the Bible. And those who have looked at it and read and researched the Quran have realized the power, the miracle and the power in the Quran. But there will always be a group that will not, because even if you bring them, and they used to have different articles, different arguments. They would say, well, Allah should have sent an angel, Malaka Rasula. An angel should have been the Rasul. Or there was another group that in the commentators of this particular surah are saying that, Muhammad was just somebody that, he was a peasant, he was this, he was not very rich, he was not. If Allah wanted to send a message, He should have given it to somebody who was powerful, who was a rich man. Because a rich man will be able to convey the message better than a poor man. And so these were different arguments that Allah Ta'ala was confronted with. The Rasul was confronted with. That people are saying this. That what if the message came to a malak? What if the message came to a rich person? Why was Muhammad chosen? And of course, this argument can be the case that we see even around us today. People are saying, well, why him? How this? Why Islam? So these ayats are actually helping to explain that. And then the ayats are, again, because I mentioned this is a Makki surah, so it's taking into account a lot of the situations and the circumstances that were happening to the believers and to the people in the city of Makkah. So what I'm going to be doing, inshallah, even from tomorrow onwards, instead of going verse by verse, I'm going to start taking, because otherwise we will not be able to finish in the next week and a bit. So I am, inshallah, going to take chunks together and then present them in that way. Instead of going verse by verse, instead of going, one or two verses at a time, I'll take sort of sectors and sections of the holy, the blessed surah, and inshallah we will take it from there. So if there's any brief questions about what we have discussed so far, I can attend to that. Otherwise, inshallah, our time for today is clear.
I can share an interesting information
Please.
about the very first sentence, the verse. Wal Quran al-Hakim.
Ahsan.
No prophet, no one, even Luqman, that we refer to him as Luqman Hakim.
Luqman, yes.
No one has received this prerogative, this special attribute, except the Quran and Allah Himself.
Jalla Jalaluhu.
No, in the Quran itself, no one has been mentioned as Hakim, the wise, except the Quran and Allah, Aziz al-Hakim, Aziz al-Hakim, Hakim al-Khabir, just the two, but nobody else. So we say he was a wise man.
Jazakallah.
The prerogative only reserved for the Quran and Allah.
For the benefit of those who might not have been able to hear, Murtaza Bhai is just telling us that The Quran al-Majid has kept this prerogative, especially the word Hakim, only for the Quran al-Majid and for Jalla Jalaluhu, his own titles and his own attributes. And that, no, even though we say Luqman Hakim as a matter of practice, it is not in the Quran in that terminology. And of course, Hakim has been kept. Thank you very much for that, sharing that. I appreciate that, inshallah. May Allah bless you, inshallah. So for the benefit of the recording as well as those who are around, Murtadha just pointed that out to us for today's discussion. And of course, the surah, as you can imagine, this is our now second discussion, and I've only reached about the first four ayat, so you can see how much wealth is in not only Surah Yasin, but all of the surah of the Quran al-Majid, inshallah. Any other question or comment, inshallah? In case if I cannot see somebody from my peripheral, please, Maulana Sahab, कुछ बात हमारी ये कुछ आयतों में रह गई हो तो आप बताइए प्लीज, तो हम आपकी नसीहत के मोहताज हैं इंशाल्लाह. जज़ाकल्लाह खैर. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our amal, our tilawat al-Quran, our tasbihat, our som, our dhikr. Inshallah, as Maulana Sahib mentioned, the tawfiq from Allah is a gift. We ask Allah to give us the tawfiq to be amongst the qa'imeen and the sa'imeen. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us closer to Him, especially in this holy month, but throughout the year, inshallah. We ask Allah that those who are ill to give them shifa kamila. For those who are in debt, for Allah ta'ala to help them fulfill their debts. For those who are suffering in so many parts of the world, for the end of their suffering, and for a speedy victory of the mustadafeen and the madhlumeen. We ask Allah ta'ala to protect our ulama, our maraja, who are serving while the imam is in occultation. We ask Allah ta'ala to hasten the return of our imam al-Hujjah al-Qaim, ajjalallahu ta'ala dhuhuruhum, and make us amongst the ashab, the ansar, and the helpers of the imam, and let us see zamana dhuhur with our own eyes. If I can ask all of you to recite one surah Fatiha for the marhumin who are no longer with us. Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alayhim ghayril maghdubi 'alayhim waladdallin. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.